Yeah, the mic is on.
Good morning, everyone. Please welcome today's panelists, Mrs. Gabriela Diaz, Professor Jens Paul, and Mrs. Asha Sharyani. Please welcome to this. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Fatma Lari, and I'm honored to be your moderator for today's panel discussion on the importance of ethics in reporting. First and foremost, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you who have traveled to Abu Dhabi to be part of this important discussion. We have an esteemed group of panelists here with us today who bring with them a wealth of knowledge and expertise in the realm of ethics as practitioners and academics and those who are involved in regulation of this profession. I'd like to take a moment to introduce each of them and give them an opportunity to say a few words. So, Mrs. Gabriela Diaz, the ISBA chair, who brings to the panel an immense value from her legal, regulatory structure and governance background, as well as her contributions in international standard setting and her academic contributions, and her regulatory contributions from memberships in the IOSCO and the European Securities and Markets Authority. And Professor Jens Paul, an ISBA board member with legal and accounting backgrounds. He has been a member of various boards within the European market, and he brings the European market, the European background and context into this discussion. And Mrs. Asha Sharyani, Ada's Acting Director of Technology and Industrial Affairs, a practicing certified public accountant from the United Arab Emirates. And I'm Fatma Lari, also a qualified accountant from Abu Dhabi, and me and Asha bring on our experience from our role within Abu Dhabi Accountability Authority, the host of this board meeting this year, this quarter. And please welcome the panelists with me. To start our discussion, I'd like to address our first question to Mrs. Gabriela. Why do you think having an ethical culture in business and organizations is important? And what role can the accountancy profession play in contributing to ethical organization culture and in fighting fraud, bribery, and corruption, as well as other things like tax evasion and other economic crimes?
Thank you very much. Of course, I'd like to start by thanking the opportunity of this panel and for the organization of this panel, which is really a pleasure and a unique opportunity to interact with Ada and with the region. Also, again, my gratefulness for the invitation, Ada invitation to host us and for providing us such excellent support and such a warm welcome to Abu Dhabi. So thank you very much. On your question, and thank you for the question, because it's actually, it goes at the heart of what we do at the Adaa-Iesba and about what I, as its chair, consider to be the most critical thing for business and economies to work well. Why is ethics important? Ethics is important because it's what rules the behavior of those involved in businesses, of those involved in organizations which work for the society, for the economy, etc. Ethics, it's a rule of behavior, a rule of behavior which makes sure that there are some principles which are common, should be common to everybody, and which allow the professionals and all those involved in the management and etc. to abide by certain principles which should avoid some problems happening within the organizations. Getting a little bit more concrete, if we think about problems that have been happening within the financial sector, business sector, etc., big scandals, some of them less relevant, but still failures and etc. In most of those cases, we can find ethical problems at the origin of what happened. Bad behavior, disrespect for some values and principles which should be ruling the behavior of these people. So the role of Iesba and of the Code of Ethics, it's exactly to provide standards which may support professionals involved in these organizations having an appropriate behavior and therefore avoiding problems in business. What's the role of the profession? Because our Code of Ethics is a Code of Ethics for professional accountants, so in that respect, what's the role of the profession? Business and economies, if I may say so, as a whole, are based on trust. Trust is what makes the financial system, economic systems, business, etc., work well, function well. And trust is based on the information that the community, investors, but not only, all those who interact with the businesses, base their decisions on the information that they get from these organizations. So, information, reporting, etc., is what forms the grounds or the basis of trust, or if badly performed, what has negative impacts on trust. The role of the profession is to make sure that this information is appropriately prepared and assured, providing additional confidence to the public and therefore allowing appropriate decisions, investment decisions, consuming decisions, lending decisions, whatever they may be. For that purpose, professionals have to be ruled by strong, very strong ethical standards, which on the one hand allow the community as a whole to be confident that wherever these accountants act, they will have a certain number of principles guiding their conduct, and secondly, that the problems that some of the problems are avoided at the origin by making sure that they prepare and assure the information in an appropriate way.
Thank you. I actually agree with you because as our mandate as Abu Dhabi Accountability Authority, we also we have the role of ensuring that the government entities and the related stakeholders, such as the auditors, and this is where the professional accountants come into play, they should abide by a certain set of principles, as you said, and integrity, transparency, and accountability, which are all revolving around the principles of the ISBA standards, are actually the principles that we promote the most. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the journey of Abu Dhabi Accountability Authority in terms of what's being done with the ethics in the Emirate of Abu Dhabi, and to expand on what you said, but within the region here. Aisha Shriani, may you please tell us a little bit about...
When we talk about the importance of ethical culture in organization, it's really crucial to promote trust and confidence when it comes to organization and among the stakeholders. The stakeholders can include investors, customers, the employees, or even the public. When organizations start acting and behaving ethically, stakeholders can feel the confidence that the organization will act in their best interest. And Fatma, when it comes to that, Adaa have started this journey since its inception in the 80s. Our mandate evolves and updated during this period, 20 years, to suit the period and the requirements of this period. We have issued a couple of initiatives, couple of rules and standards that will help to enhance and elevate the quality of audit at the Emirates of Abu Dhabi. But in particular, when we talk about ethics, recently Adaa have launched a disclosure system. The disclosure system is a system for government officials that require to close their financial disclosure when they assume their role and when they leave them. This definitely will help to enhance transparency and accountability. In addition to that, we need a mechanism to report about misconduct and ethical breaches. We have launched Wajib platform. This platform is dedicated for the public, for the customers who deal with these subject entities, for vendors and even employees. They can report this unethical behavior, misconduct that's subject to Adaa mandate. One of the things that I would like to emphasize on is in order for us to prevent fraud or misconduct or economic crime, organizations, they need to set the tone and the expectation regarding the compliance of laws and regulations, maintaining transparency and avoiding conflict of interest. And that's why Adaa have launched a couple of those initiatives in order to promote accountability and transparency. Now, when it comes to our role as an accounting profession, we are in a very unique position. We have accounting today have a role and responsibility toward maintaining financial record and reporting on financial performance. So they have a crucial role in detecting fraud, misconduct, and economic crime. And Adaa took notice of this, and we have issued actually, beside the international standards when it comes to auditing financial statement, additional requirements that suits our financial ecosystem. For example, we have certain requirements when it comes to issuing an opinion regarding compliance with laws and regulations. The control environment statutory auditor today is required to issue an opinion about the internal control over financial reporting of our subject entities. Also, we have certain requirements regarding EQCR. We want to maintain the quality of the audit provided to our subject entities. And that's why at the initial stage we were focusing more into elevating the audit when it comes to audit firms, statutory auditor appointment requirements, and then we have issued also internal audit rules and eventually adopting the code. I believe you work directly on this, and I would love to hear the story behind adopting the code. And I know that we have additional requirements. So can you elaborate?
Yeah, sure. Well, I just wanted to tell all of you that I'm wearing two hats today, of a moderator and a speaker. Yes, I was on the team at Adaa that worked on assessing how to roll out the adoption of the Code of Ethics on the level of Emirate of Abu Dhabi. Well, the adoption of the ISBA code is not new to the Emirate of Abu Dhabi or to the UAE, because that is the foundation on which, or the standards on which the auditors here, for example, provide their services. But we wanted to make it an official adoption of this code so we can also add in additional requirements. We are in full adoption of the code, but we have some more stringent requirements, not stringent, but some specific requirements that are better suited to our financial ecosystem. And I just wanted to highlight a few of those additional requirements, or the most important ones, because it also entails an early adoption of some of the provisions of the 2022 ISBA Code of Ethics that is effective at a later date. And that one includes, for example, the elaboration or the changes made on the definition of public interest entities, because we wanted to include some of the assets that are critical to Abu Dhabi's ecosystem, not just the financial, but maybe in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of services, in terms of, because of Abu Dhabi's investments, landscape, and because Abu Dhabi government does have investments globally and within the country, so we wanted to include those into the definition of PI, and what we see that require those additional requirements that are in terms of the independence of the auditor. In addition to that, there is one very interesting but controversial to some people, a requirement that is the provision of non-audit services by the assurance provider or the auditor of an entity. The ISBA code, of course, requires that any non-audit services provided, especially to the PI entities, should ensure, like they should report to those charged with governance and ensure that that does not create any type of self-review threat. And we generalized that requirement on all PI and non-PI entities because of what we saw in the market and how we wanted to allow non-audit services that only would ensure the independence of the auditor. I think that is the main additions to the ISBA code. So we are taking the international standards as a baseline, and then we are adding a few requirements to it. I also wanted to maybe shed light on Adaa's upcoming plans in terms of its regulatory authority role and the authority that we have over both subject entities and their auditors. And that is subject entities which are subject to Abu Dhabi Accountability Authority's mandate. I just wanted to give some context because we oversee the governments that are as part, I mean the entities or departments that are part of the Abu Dhabi government scope, as well as any investments or companies that Abu Dhabi government owns 25% stake and above. So about our upcoming plans, we have issued, as Aisha said, a few updated requirements for both financial statement preparers, for the auditors in terms of ethics, in terms of what is expected from them in the past 3 years. And that has come as an evolution of what it started with. And we have seen this with the ISBA code because it's been in place since the 1970s, but how many times it has been changed, or changes have gone over because we live in a dynamic environment and it's ever changing, so we have to adjust our requirements, we have to observe what happens, and that is what we are planning to do in the coming years. We want to monitor the result of implementing these new regulations, including the Code of Ethics, to see its effect on the scope that we are responsible for. And then maybe we will see how we should adjust. Is it fitting our regulatory requirements or no? So I wanted to hear from Jens about the roles of other key players in the global fight against economic crime.
I think it's very important to highlight the role of the professional accountants, because they are acting in the public interest, as it's stated in the Adaa-Iesba code. But there are, you're right, many other stakeholders, public accountant in business, which are members of the profession, and sometimes non-PAs in business doing CFO roles and others. But we have also the legal profession and other professionals, tax advisors in some jurisdictions which are not member of the PA professions or other professional organizations. We have unregulated professions. So there's a lot of others who have to be considered. But I think, and that is my experience in the last few years, that the discussion of which is the role of each and every player in the big game is very much coming to the issue of trust and the role. And what we have in our code, as you mentioned, Gabriela, is not only something which is ethical for the profession, but it is relevant for others too. If you see the discussion we have for the responsibility of management, for example, whether they have to act for the shareholders' interest only, or is there another dimension for stakeholders at large, and which are the stakeholders? So there is a swift in the discussion, especially concerning, I would not only say on crime, because crime is clear no-claim, there is a no-go area, and it's for the criminal and other institutions to fight against, but there's also the gray zone we are calling, and you probably have witnessed our discussion on, I have to mention it, on tax planning, where you sometimes have clearly illegal issues, and you have clearly green issues, which are fine, but you have this gray zone in between, and how to navigate there. And even criminal issues are not so crystal clear at the beginning, because they're a little bit dodgy, you're not sure whether they are right or wrong. And then the critical mindset, the behavior, the attitude is very important, and I think for this our code can be have some example of good behavior, I would say good behavior, and that is relevant for others too. And one last point I would like to add, if you're looking at regulation, modern regulation, regulators and legislators are more and more not looking who is doing that, but more what is done. It's a tax service, it's an accountancy service, it's a preparer service. So regulate the service, and you're ignoring whether it's a lawyer, a tax advisor, professional, non-professional, etc., because the public interest is that the service is right. I think that's perhaps a trend we have to consider too in our work on Adaa-Iesba.
Thank you, Professor. Actually, many of these questions are leading to questions that are coming later on, but I just wanted to talk about the key players, maybe not all of us. I read this interesting article which said that accountability is like a hierarchy. It starts with personal accountability, that is at the individual level, that is the financial statement preparer or the auditor themselves. It's their personal level of accountability that they have to abide by. And then comes a second level of accountability, which is known as mutual accountability, and that is something that those parties agree on to hold on to, and that is, for example, when they both agree to abide by the ethical standards issued by the Adaa-Iesba. So they have mutual understanding that these standards are applicable to both of them. And that, of course, adds to building the trust and the confidence among these stakeholders and those who are affected by what these stakeholders do and their actions. And then comes a third, and that is the broader and the wider scope of accountability, which is the system accountability. And this is where the regulator's role comes in, and we see ourselves as Abu Dhabi Accountability Authority within that realm or scope. So the Adaa-Iesba standards are there, the professionals are choosing to adopt it, but us as regulators should also be able to enforce it, and then the accountability cycle will be complete. because without it, then the accountability cycle is not complete. And I think when it comes to accountability, the start point is ethics, because if we look at the principles in the Code of Ethics of ISBA, for example, it's comprehensive, and it covers not just the integrity and the transparency part, but it also covers the due care and the professional behavior from those professionals. So I think it's good for us to explore or try to implement this comprehensive accountability model when it comes to ethical standards. Now, Mrs. Diaz, what are the weak points in the financial ecosystem, and what could be done to reinforce them from your perspective as ISBA's chairperson?
My answer, my immediate answer must be ethics. The weak point and what has to be worked on to make sure that things work well. If you ask me about the financial sector, financial system, of course there are always a lot of problems that we can identify in terms of the structure of the entities, the way they are governed internally, etc. But again, it is my conviction, and this is my conviction now, and it was my conviction when I was a securities regulator, that most of the problems can be avoided if you work if you take a special attention and focus on the ethics. Because any organization in the financial sector, it's particularly sensitive. Any of these organizations are run by a group of people, humans, for the time being at least. Then we can speak about other things, but it's about humans, about people that we are speaking about, with their vulnerabilities, with their special characters, doesn't matter. One thing that is common to all the organizations in the financial sector is that these people are taking care of the money of the others. This is what is typical in the financial sector. They have fiduciary duties, which means that they have to act in the best interest of the shareholders, but I'm turning now to Jens Paul because he touched upon a very important point and a very important trend that is there, which is the idea that the companies and businesses have not only to serve the interests of their shareholders, but also at least have into consideration, while serving the interests of shareholders, the interests of the community. This means that these people running companies, businesses, etc., directors, managers, audit committees, CFOs, have in their hands the power to do right or to do wrong. They have the money of the others. They have to use it for the interest of the others and not in its own interests. And this raises immediately a number of ethical issues that you have two options, or you address them. One option is addressing them properly and making sure that throughout the business model, the organization, etc., a clear, not only message, but also instruments are put in place to make sure that at all levels and in all stages of the functioning of the organization, these ethical principles are taken into account. Not only that you create an internal culture of ethics, but also that you have the instruments in place to make sure that they translate into concrete actions, approaches, etc. Or you don't do it, and then you have a huge risk that the unethical approach of who is at the top of the organization drills down throughout the organization and ends up providing very negative outputs. It is not my role to say, well, the weaknesses of the financial system are this and that. Also because they change over time. We see the crisis, we see financial crises happening, some of them also based on ethical problems. If you look at what happened back in 2008, it was clear that there were corporate governance problems, ethical problems, short-term goals, and etc. So, what can be done? I think that there should be like an agreement. You spoke about the hierarchy of accountability, the individual approach, the agreement that has to be put in place between some people or some entities or some levels, and then the regulators. I agree with that, and I think that the Code of Ethics and what Adaa-Iesba does is useful at the three levels at the financial system. First, because setting and developing the ethics standards and making very clear in a structured way which are the principles, which are the values that professionals have to consider when they act. That helps at the first level creating what I call the ethical muscle, preparing people by embedding these values and these principles in their professional behavior, preparing people to be ready to make the right choices once they are faced with ethical dilemmas that will, no matter in which context, show up at some point in time. Then the second level is, I think, where we are very clearly, because the standard setters, it's the profession wanting to regulate itself. It's more or less like this. So it's like a social agreement and a professional agreement that all the people working in the same area will abide by these values. The third one, the regulators, of course, we are not, the Adaa-Iesba is not regulators, but of course the action of the regulators in implementing and enforcing the standards is absolutely critical. If I may, if you give me 1 minute, I will not miss the opportunity to comment on what you said about the decisions that were made by Adaa and Abu Dhabi with respect to the implementation of the code, which I think was a landmark and a very important step in the use of the ethics code, the Adaa-Iesba ethics code. For many reasons, this is important for the region. This is a very special market, the UAE market. So this is particularly important. But the decisions that you made in terms of early implementation of some of the standards and the rules, if I may say so, the norms in the code, and the wide approach to the application of the code, both, for instance, in enlarging the PI concept and making it applicable to those charged with governance. On the one hand, is exactly what the code aims at, for instance, with the PI notion. The Adaa-Iesba decided on a certain concept that each country should test against its own reality and see which other entities should be included in the notion. This is, as far as I understand, exactly what you did. And with respect to its application to those charged of governance, this is really visionary and that translates a very sophisticated vision about the impact and the relevance that the code may have in getting that agreement that you mentioned between a certain number of people from different groups around, having these standards and these principles as a guide for their behavior.
Yes, because I just want to elaborate on that, because in the end those charged with governance have the responsibility they should take ownership of these decisions, because whether it's the financial statement preparer or the auditor, in the end they're being appointed by those charged with governance and overseen by those charged with governance.
Right, and because they have different people with different professional backgrounds or certifications working exactly in the same area and doing the same thing. Preparers can be accountants and non-accountants. CFOs can be accountants and non-accountants. The audit committee is a collective body which usually has accountants and non-accountants. So, from a consistency perspective, but mainly if you want to have a truly reliable system in place, all of them should, in principle, theoretically, have the same values, the same principles, and the same standards. So I think this is a really very good decision. Of course, difficult to take. I can imagine. I don't know which discussions you had before making that decision, but it's something to which I think that the world should look at. And because it will also influence, I think, the corporate governance community and approach and etc.
Yes. I just wanted to go back to one point that you said. You talked about the tone at the top. And I do agree with that. And I see that when you put motivation at top, motivation comes down to everyone. If you put ethics on top, ethics comes down to everyone. So ethics is the start point to sustainability, something that we will elaborate on in a few minutes. I just wanted to hear from Asha Shariani about within the ecosystem here in the region, or in Abu Dhabi specifically, or the UAE. What are the areas of improvements that you would see that should be considered?
From regulatory perspective, I think Ms. Diaz also touched on this. We need to have more standardization and collaboration when it comes to financial regulations and between regulators and professional bodies. We need to work together when we put standards and guidance for financial regulations. And one of the things actually Adaa worked on is the outreach that have been happening for the past 2 years. We have sat with the Ministry of Economy, we have sat with SCA, Security and Commodities Authority, the audit firms, our subject entities. So working together, we will ensure to come up with a regulation that will work for our financial ecosystem and suits everyone. The other thing is the technology. I think we touched on this also previously. Technology is a very hot topic nowadays. We need to increase investment in technology. We need to come up with analytical solutions that will help us as a profession in analyzing, detecting suspicious patterns or transactions in the system. Will help us to collect data, have continuous monitoring, and report on this. And that's why our initiatives, when we have launched a couple of platforms in terms of statutory auditors, internal audits, the Wajid platform, this will help us to achieve this, the continuous monitoring, and to mitigate any risk when it comes to reliance on technology.
When you said hot topic, I thought you would bring up ChatGPT because everyone is, talking about it in every session.
I know. I'm just hoping that my kids do not know about ChatGPT at the moment. I don't know if they will not learn. They are still in elementary. So yes, But by the way, like ChatGPT is really. I believe that it will make a difference in our profession. I have used it a couple of times, and it's great actually.
I believe it's a good research tool, but it's something you can't be fully reliant on. And this brings us to the discussion around artificial intelligence and how what change or impact it will have on certain professions. From the professional accountant's perspective, because there is a lot of judgment involved, there is the ethical principles. So I just wanted to hear views on will that type of technology be able to replace or enforce those principles? Yeah, it's
Sorry, I can start and then to Jens. And I can start by only by saying that I don't think at all that it will replace the accountancy profession. It will most probably, and is already, changing it dramatically. The accountancy profession will always have a strong role to play, and I would say that as the technology will be replacing some actions, the accountancy profession will have more room to be more and more, or to play growingly a critical role in the organizations by contributing to the strategic thinking, advising those charged with governance, and above all interfering or helping building the right culture within the organizations. It will give the accountancy profession space by making them free from some manual, let's say so, activities, give them more space to be more on the other side of thinking, strategic approach, etc. But Jens.
Yes, I would like to add some aspects. First of all, we started as Adaa-Iesba technology projects. So first of all, in the independent sector, but also what the changing technology will have impact on the professional work, on our standards. And I think one of the main issues is there's a constant change, and that is a challenge for the professional. So the educational part, being not afraid of new technology, to understand what it's behind, and not being on the one side biased by ChatGPT to say, oh, it's a technology, it's right. No, garbage in, garbage out sometimes, or some negative data manipulation, etc. So I think the problems are the same, but they are changing their dimension, and the entry point for the thought process as an accountant in verifying and in auditing, ensuring something. So it's a great tool, or technology is a great help, but also at the same time a challenge. And that's why I think the agility of the profession, and coming back to the Adaa-Iesba code, this principle-based concept, you can say, is one of the key issues. We detected, yes, new technology, we should change our application material to integrate it, but we are not changing the principles, because you have to be the integrity, the conflict of interest, or other issues may occur in the technology sector too, if you have understood how the technology is working. And I think making the message to the professionals, younger and older ones, it's a positive development where we have to be at the top and to understand and to guide a little bit the development. Then we are in the right position also to make a proper judgment in the end, the professional judgment. Only if we are knowledgeable and open for new technology and development. I think that's an attitude which we want to foster.
Yes, and in Abu Dhabi, I think we have taken into consideration the challenges that you are touching on, but the basis again is the principles. For example, when it came to confidentiality, because of the cybersecurity risks and all of that, you need to take some steps in order to ensure those principles are in place and are being whatever is in place is effective. So, for example, in our statutory appointment, statutory auditors appointment rules, we added that element into it to ensure the confidentiality of the information when it comes, because everything is on the cloud now. So, I think, as you said, there is an evolution, as you said as well, there is changes, but we have to adopt. We have to use it in a way that it will benefit us, it will make us all go forward, and it will make our traditional roles easier, so we can focus on the strategic thinking and so on. And I think a phrase that I've been hearing recently, which is ethical thinking, is very important, because as Mrs. Diaz, you said, it's hard, well, maybe it's not there yet, but the ethical judgment, I don't think that artificial intelligence right now can replace the application of ethical standards and the ethical judgment from the human and the profession itself.
It's giving you a better base for information. You're better informed, hopefully, and then you can make a better decision, perhaps. perhaps, but for example, the role and mindset provisions we have to be critical and to have this questioning mindset is very important, and not just believe because the artificial intelligence is saying you how to do it. You have to think about and to follow up and to make your own judgment in the end. I think that's important.
Now, going back to something that I think all of you brought up is that the ethical principles, they are not applicable only to the professional accountants, because they are the basis of operating any or being in any profession, actually, whether it's in accounting, medicine, legal, because I believe both of you come from a legal background. So the integrity, the confidentiality, the objectivity, the due care, you need it all in all professions. So it brings us to the question of whether the code being adopted widely around the world, does ISBA believe that it could serve an ethical benchmark beyond the profession?
Well, thank you for that question, because it's close to my heart and to things on which I strongly believe. I would say that the Adaa-Iesba Code of Ethics is already a benchmark for some other professionals and some other people. The strength of this code, the strength of the principles on which it is based, the conceptual framework, and everything there is strong and important enough not to be taken into account not only by the accountants but by others. But I think that your question is more, could we make it applicable to others? Well, as you may know, we are facing that question in some specific areas, so to speak, namely with respect to the current sustainability projects that we are developing. And if you have observed our meeting yesterday, you may have seen that this is at the core of our discussions now. What can we do? Should we do anything to make this applicable to others? And there is something already there, something to which we committed formally and publicly, so I can speak very easily about it, which is to develop what is called profession-agnostic standards for non-professional accountants in the area of sustainability assurance. So we are developing ethics standards for sustainability assurance, and in that respect, it is we have committed to develop these standards in a way that they can be used by others. And this is so for many reasons. Well, there was a regulatory call from IOSCO, but this is not, of course, this is important, that regulators ask for it, but this is, this does not mean that we follow every regulatory calls, or that we don't go, if we don't have a regulatory call, we have our own strategic thinking, and when necessary, we take the road. It is our conviction that this is the right way to go, because if there are many other professionals, and we have the data, we are not working in a vacuum, we know what's happening in the market. Sustainability assurance is being provided by almost half of the market is being taken by other service providers. So the public interest requires that, like Jens was saying, it does not matter who is providing the service. It does matter that the service is provided in the right way. And that takes us to make something, or to offer something to the community that may serve this purpose. And what we can offer is to develop the standards in a way that they can be used, accessible, understandable by whoever is providing services in this area. Now, it is important to make clear that we don't make a decision about who is going to use the standards. We can't do it, it's not our role. So again, and going back again to your very good example of how accountability works and the different layers, this, if the community thinks that this is really where we should go and how we should go, we need the help of the regulators. And others. The regulators will probably be at the top of the responsibilities to make a decision on which standards the providers should use, but the users themselves, or national standard setters, or professional organizations, they will make their decisions as well. So this is a collective project to make sure that everybody works for the public interest. It is difficult for us to make for the time being to say this code will be applicable to everybody. We can't make such a decision, but as we discuss this topic, we start seeing that this could apply to many other areas. Tax planning, for instance, you have auditors, accountants providing tax planning services, but you have consultants, lawyers, many other people. Why? Why is it so that some of them, depending on their background, may have to, will have to abide by some ethical standards that we are developing, aiming at being ready by the end of the year, and the others, because they are not professional accountants, do not have the same framework. That doesn't make sense. It's not logical, and having the public interest as we do, as the final goal of everything we do, we can't have a different vision than the Code of Ethics should be applicable, or at least serve as a benchmark for all the individuals involved in similar activities.
I will give you an example from the European Union, where we are developing these ethical standards on tax planning, where we have included in our stakeholder outreach activities lawyers and all the other professions, which is important to get input. So they are aware of our development and they are giving input, and in the end we hope that they are also confident with our approach. But others, regulators or legislators and the European Commission, are looking at these standards and they are thinking whether to include them in their own legislation. So we have not the remit to give it to the tax lawyers, to the tax advisors as a standard, but as you mentioned, as a benchmark, the regulators or the legislators are taking this and putting that in their own legislation and widening the scope. And that is a great success if such things are happening, and we are bringing the right items to the agenda, and then they are applicable to the services. I think that is the trend.
Actually, from listening to the discussions of the board yesterday on sustainability assurance, although I'm not a sustainability reporting or assurance specialist, but being a professional accountant, I felt everything was relevant. Like, why isn't the reporting requirements or the ethical requirements of financial statements preparers and assurers, why shouldn't it be applied to the other types of reporting? So, and I believe, as we have said that a few times today, the foundation is there with the ISBA, because it gives the foundation of reporting, not just financial statement reporting, because you need transparency here and there, you need the clarity here and there, you need the consistency everywhere. So I think we're looking forward to how the board will conclude on this project. Professor Jens, how does the code support an ecosystem of high quality sustainability reporting and assurance in more detail?
Yes, you can say, because we have the principles, and these are established principles which are relevant for all the professional works in the sustainability area, and in the financial area, in the consultancy area, everything. But what we are trying with the projects now to make clear how to implement and how to apply the principles in a specific environment. And if I will give you an example. You mentioned the non-assuring services for the auditor in the classical financial audit. We added with the last project new requirements, we made clarifications, and we added a lot of application material, which was concentrated on the financial environment. I wouldn't say that in the sustainability environment, the independence issues are totally different. No, the principles are the same. But there might be specific situations, and that's what we are trying to elaborate. Which are the situations? I will give you an example. Prepare preparing the accounts, bookkeeping, is one issue. What is an equivalent in the sustainability preparation? Which kind of services are there? Are they the same as in the financial? They might be different. Or another example, the role of experts in this context. Because we feel comfortable in all financial KPIs and regulations, but are we as confident in eco-diversity KPIs? I think not. So we have reliance on others. So the importance of the independence or objectivity of experts, external experts, is on higher agenda probably than in the financial. So these are examples where we are now digging in. And the first step is to look around whether definitions should be changed. For example, you have witnessed our discussion yesterday. Who are the service providers? How they are organized? Who are the owners of such entities? Are there other conflict of interest? But the principles are the same. So we're looking more on the implication and clarification side and want to understand, make outreach. And I think that's a model we developed in the last few years, the round tables, to go to our stakeholders and ask them, what are your problems? And not doing that on the exposure draft level, because that's quite late. So before starting drafting, communicate with people to look at the issues which might be critical or challenging, and then try to find a proper solution and keep the communication with our stakeholders on an ongoing basis. I think that is something we try to do, especially if we are, as we have it, the problem with the sustainability issue, under some time pressure, because everyone wants to see now the assurance standards and the independence standards and the ethical environment.
The challenge is because, correct me if I'm wrong, it's because the sustainability reporting covers a very wide area of expertise. So one of the discussions I had with one of the technical advisors to the board was that the independence standards you are working on will be on the preparer, the assurance provider, and then the challenges on the expert, because the expert might come from any field. It can be from environment, it can be from governance, I don't know, it can be from many areas that are aimed towards sustainability.
And there's another issue, if you're looking at the implementation of IFRS and then the enforcement of that has taken 30 years of experience. The sustainability reporting, we know GRI is not brand new, but the mandatory usage of sustainability reporting frameworks is just starting. So we have not a learning curve of voluntary implementation over decades. It's just a short period of 3 or 4 or 5 years. And then to find a proper level of standards is quite challenging. So we have to implement also or think about a phasing in where we know that there will be probably violations and how to handle with this. I think that is also an important issue, because it's not as you mentioned, it's not an established area. It's a fast developing area.
And if I may, Fatima, it's a developing area, totally new, totally different from what has been done until now, which was financial reporting. The basis, the content, the substance, and even the objective can be very different. So it will take, Jens was saying, some phasing in period for the users. But I'd say for us as well, we will not, what we were aiming to do is to provide the best, the highest quality possible standards within a very short time frame. The urgency has 2 reasons. One is regulatory. The mandatory reporting is already there in many jurisdictions. Mandatory assurance will be there soon. So this is a time pressure that is being put on us because of very concrete and regulatory reasons, but also because we believe that this contributes, what we are all doing in that respect, positively contributes to the transition to a greener and more sustainable world. This is our little small part in the responsibility of making the change. And there is an urgency, as you know, in that respect as well. achieving the success with the United Nations goals on sustainability and etc. There is really a sense of urgency around this, because this is what keeps us awake at night and keeps us pressured. Now, let me, if I may, introduce a small topic, which is the following. We are developing sustainability standards with the full conviction that this is what we have to do now, and it will take part of our work, or the biggest part of our work and efforts on the next 2 years. There will be others developing standards at the same time. I think it is our conviction that these standards, the standards that we are going to develop, have a very special responsibility and will be responsible for something happening in the near future, because we follow a due process. We have oversight from the PIOB. We are monitored by the monitoring group. We work for the public interest. This is a non-for-profit activity, and also we don't. The standards are for the public interest and nothing else. So this structure around this governance, this conceptual framework of our own standards, I think that they help making them serve the right purpose, which is being reliable to help enhance confidence in this case, sustainability information. What these standards will aim at is to make sure that sustainability information is properly developed, properly assured, and therefore that it fosters confidence within the users and the community, etc. Therefore, the standards have to be up to this mission and to this goal, and be the standards themselves developed in a way that that creates confidence and trust from the public and from the users and from the community.
Yeah, because it's all of this reflects on us as individuals as well, because the decision makers rely on these reports and information to make decisions going forward for everyone and the public interest. Professor, there is a very interesting question on greenwashing. So how do you see the role of the Adaa-Iesba code in mitigating the pervasive issue of greenwashing?
So I think it fits well to our discussion we just had, because it's an evolving issue, it's a developing subject, sustainability reporting, and the greenwashing issue. I think it again shows the importance that we're looking to the whole value chain of the reporting chain, the preparer, the assurance, and the governance. And I think, and last but not least, the enforcement. I think you could say, if we are using our principles, there's no problem with greenwashing. Yeah, sure. And you could put it the same on non-assurance services. If you are putting the principles, independence is guaranteed every time. But perhaps we have to be a little bit more granular in this specific context. But what does it mean? You know the stuff paper from Adaa-Iesba on greenwashing, where we try to highlight that it starts with education, then it comes with role and mindset issues, so being critical, and there's another issue, which is what we also discussed in the tax project. There's a little bit this stand-back test. I will give you a very simple example of greenwashing, or perhaps it's not greenwashing. It's about the sustainability report of an airport in Germany. They said we are net zero. Yes, for sure. They're using green energy. They are making all the sustainability efforts of recycling, etc. But they're ignoring that their main task is to serve airlines. On a formal point, they are right. It's up to the airlines to make their own sustainability report. But in the context of saying I'm green as an airport, there's a public perception that something must be wrong. And not mentioning that, and that's a very simple issue. It's nothing about equal diversity KPIs. It's just having a stand back and looking at what others who are not as trained sophisticated in the details would look at this. They would say, "Are you crazy?" And that was exactly what happened in Germany in the newspaper. They would say, "Nice, but it's ridiculous." And in the end, it was counterproductive. I think the role of an accountant, an auditor, in this respect would be have this wider economical, reputational scope and say, it's fine, but make it clear in which context you are acting, and make clear which efforts you are doing, that you are convincing airlines or other customers of yours to do the right thing. That would be the better message, even though perhaps they are fully aligned with the standards. I think that is something which ethics can add, to have this broader perspective, stakeholder, shareholder, public at large. I think that is an example for greenwashing, which I think is an example of the role of a proper accountant using the code. And that is something perhaps in our project, if you're looking at application material in the next few steps, we might add the one or the other to make it clear what we mean acting now in a different environment with different reporting frameworks. What is the role and the thinking, thought process of a professional accountant?
It's good to hear from you, Professor. Yes. Yes, we are. I was going to. Actually, I have one question, and this is from I think the last one. I hope it's the last one. It's for Professor Jens. It's a question from our discussions with the stakeholders in terms of the rollout of the Code of Ethics. It was something actually it became clear to me because we were talking to, for example, the assurance providers. It's about the difference in the definition of the public interest entity between the ISBA code and the code of the Adaa-Iesba in terms of international standards on auditing. And what are the ISBA's views on the impact of this difference in definition on the profession and the public interest?
I could now start a lecture, but that will be very brief.
Actually, it's okay. You can take your time. I'm listening.
Okay. The first notion is Adaa-Iesba has no pie definition. They are just talking of entities of significant public interest, and this is the old terminology the Adaa-Iesba code has used for many years. So that's the first notion. Then Adaa-Iesba started a project on the pie definition and made a new, more clarified definition and come to the pie. What is a pie? And then the more steps. What is a minimum requirement and the add-ons for national regulator standard setters to add. And there's now, and that's the good message, the coordination between Adaa-Iesba and Adaa-Iesba is ongoing. And as you know, Adaa-Iesba is just taking on and making alignment decisions. And I think the only question they have to solve in the next few months is whether they change from, in the one or the other standard, from listed to pie. But you can say in the next few months there will be a further alignment between the two boards. And I think that's, in general, also in sustainability and in other areas, there is now a coordination which is very good and very effective, that these type of differences are either necessary or will be discussed before, hopefully before the final standard is there. So it is so implemented, and you see in many of our consultation or exposure draft questions, both boards are addressing questions. For example, in the pie definition, we had questions from the Adaa-Iesba, which impact that might have to their own standards, and the other way around, if they are publishing exposure drafts, there are also issues on the ethical consequences. So there's a close coordination, and I think there shouldn't be any confusion anymore in the very near future with the pie definition.
That's great to hear. Thank you, Professor. So, ladies and gentlemen, and Metha, that brings us to the end of our panel discussion on the importance of ethics in reporting. I'd like to take a moment to thank our esteemed panelists, Mrs. Diaz, Professor Paul, and Mrs. Ashariani, and myself, Ms. Larry.
It was our pleasure. Thank you very much.
It has been great, and I think the discussion has been very valuable to all of us. I'd also like to thank the audience for your attention today, and for the coordinators, all the coordinators, from both sides, ISBA and Adaa side. So I just want to say that ethics is something that can take us all forward as a community, and we are looking forward to listening and collaborating with institutions like ISBA, who have built a very strong foundation in this area. Once again, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in the near future. Maybe in Abu Dhabi again. Yeah. There was supposed to be a 15-minute break, but it's only going to be like 5 minutes for you guys. So.